A deal is in the works between the Chicago Teachers Union and Chicago Public Schools, potentially wrapping up contract negotiations by the holidays. It comes after a tense 8 months, with the CTU giving a no confidence vote to Chicago Public Schools CEO Pedro Martinez, and looming questions on if, when, and how Mayor Brandon Johnson will oust him from leadership. Joining me now is CTU President Stacy Gates. Great to see you here. One of the most powerful women in the city. In your eyes, why don't we have a deal yet?
Well, that's my frustration at this point, and the frustration of many of my members. We went into this contract campaign with the hopes of finding more commonality and partnership than we've received. Our contract proposals look like the CPS 5-year strategic plan. They look like the mayor's education transition report. Our intention was to be collegial. Our intention was to make sure that the actual proposals did what they needed to do. And so both a bit of disappointment and a lot of frustration.
Do you feel like you're getting closer to a deal getting done, though? What's your optimism level?
It's bargaining, so I don't usually have an optimism level.
Okay.
What I will say is that since our rally right before Thanksgiving, we have seen a different Chicago Public Schools at the negotiating table. So they have been more readily able to offer counters that we believe are responsive to our original proposals. So decent movement. I guess the disappointment is that we should already be done. We're almost halfway through the school year. Some of the things that we could have settled at the table could have been a benefit this school year, so the disappointment still lingers.
And you all have come down on some proposals as well to kind of meet them at the table. At first you had 9% raises called for. Now you're asking for 6% in the first 2 years and then 5% in year 3 and 4. The question that many people have from that, with Chicago Public Schools struggling the way they are financially, where do you anticipate this money coming from to pay for those teacher raises?
You know, the Chicago Public Schools has never been funded at the level in which it requires funding. There's always been a structural deficit, so this question is a bit of a red herring, if you will. The Chicago Public Schools has never settled a contract that it could afford with the Chicago Teachers Union in the history of the district. What does that mean? It means we figure it out at the table. And so we are willing partners to figure out how to put a deal together that both meets the needs of the students that we serve, because if we don't have students in the Chicago Public Schools, then we don't have workers in the Chicago Public Schools. So we want to anchor this contract to what students need. Right now, 80% of our school communities do not have libraries or librarians. We want to build a pipeline to get more librarians into the system, at the same time holding the ones that we have and figuring out how to start building them from day one. But this idea that we would allow this funding dilemma that we always have stop us from aspiring to provide a district that Chicago students deserve, I think is the misnomer in this. This is not just about dollars and cents, it's about the investment in the futures of our young people, and we can hold both things.
Let's talk about your relationship with Mayor Brandon Johnson. It gets talked about a lot, whether online, social media, and the narrative out there is that CTU is pulling the strings and you're sort of a Lady Macbeth who's controlling the mayor's office. Clear this up for us. What is that relationship like?
Well, first off, if the relationship is what some of the media provide, then we should have a contract. Right?
That would make sense.
It would make perfect sense if the caricature was true. The caricature is not true. And in fact, what I would say is that Brandon Johnson and Stacy Gates are friends. Mayor Johnson is in charge of the city of Chicago and the Chicago Public Schools, which means that our relationship is a bit adversarial as well. And so he and I have been managing the dimension of the relationship since he became mayor. You know, what's interesting is that people make a lot about nothing instead of asking the question that you just did. Every relationship has boundaries. Our relationship too has boundaries. And what does that mean? It means that he has a job to do and we need a contract before Christmas.
So as CTU President Stacy Gates, would you consider yourself an advisor to Mayor Brandon Johnson, or is it strictly you guys were friends before and now you have jobs that kind of conflict.
Well, if I was an advisor, we would have a contract right now because I would have already advised him to settle the teacher's contract.
Well, yeah, but advisement doesn't always mean they're going to follow what you advise either, right?
Well, I mean, listen, let's just say this. Mayor Johnson has a lot of entities and spaces in which he has to engage. The Chicago Public Schools is one. He's a middle school teacher. He sends his children to the Chicago Public Schools. He's invested in the Chicago Public Schools. He's also invested in creating a different culture where, you know, bargaining doesn't have to end up on the picket line. And so this has been difficult for us because we are building new culture. And there are a lot of entrenched forces in this city who do not want to see that culture manifest. A culture of collegiality. Look, if you look at the Chicago Public Schools 5-year strategic plan, you look at our proposals, and you look at the mayor's education transition report, all three of us want sustainable community schools, right? All three entities. All three entities want school communities that have art, music, physical education. All three entities want spaces in which Black teachers can teach Black history, in which bilingual teachers are able to offer instruction in dual language schools. Mm-hmm. These are all things that are covered in all three documents. That alignment is what I would have hoped would have already manifested into a contract. Right now, we're not there, but we do intend to get there, and we're putting pressure on the district and the mayor to settle this by Christmas.
Now, speaking of alignment, there seems to be alignment between school leaders and Pedro Martinez, the CPS CEO, about 700 different principals signing on to a letter vocalizing support for the embattled CPS leader. With all of that support from people that run and lead these schools, why should he be ousted?
Well, here's the thing. When the tiny boss supports the big boss, that makes sense. We're the workers. So principals being presented by their boss with a letter to sign, they need a union. See, my members won't have to sign such a letter because they're protected by a union. So this idea that that letter informs widespread support is unclear to me. What is clear to me is that our CEO should be spending a lot more time lobbying legislators in Springfield to make sure that we have enough revenue to run our school district. The lobbying for the job, look, I get it, you know, and in order to do the job effectively, you're going to need funding from the state. And right now, he's been MIA from those conversations. We're going to need funding because we have the most unhoused students in the state of Illinois. We have the most bilingual students in the state of Illinois. We have students with the most special education needs in the state of Illinois. The funding from the state of Illinois hasn't increased with those numbers.
So is that the key issue with Pedro Martinez's leadership, is lack of funding, lack of outreach to Springfield? Is that kind of the impetus of it?
Look, I'll say it like this. If CEO Martinez was the CEO under Rahm Emanuel, he would probably be doing a great job because it's just due, it's adversarial. But because he's under a different mayor, because we want a more collegial partnership, he's having a hard time with that. Look, we want to break down these artificial walls of hierarchy. We want to break down these artificial walls of adversarial relationships. I am a teacher, a high school history teacher. I am a mother of 3 Black children. I would love nothing more than to be in a situation where we could talk really about how all students in Chicago get what they deserve. I believe we need sports, winter sports, fall sports, spring sports, summer sports. Sometimes in our schools, our students don't even have transportation to make it to athletic contests. That's one of the things that we're bargaining right now. So this idea that adversarial relationships is a priority of our union, I want to dispel that, because all you're doing is fighting. We wanted a more collegial relationship that helps us win the school Chicago students deserve. He and I are going to have to go to Springfield and figure this out. he and I are going to have to implement this contract that we will land eventually here in Chicago. The relationship has to become a partnership.
Something else key to this bargaining, an issue that's come up many times throughout many negotiations, teachers' assistants. And it's become a thorny issue because it's kind of ruffled some feathers with the SEIU recently. And they've expressed some disappointment with your stance on teachers' assistants and their involvement. Now, of course, SEIU, your unions have allied in the past, stood in solidarity. Does this latest proposal from you step on SEIU's toes, especially when it comes to special education teachers' assistants?
Well, a couple of things. The first thing that I said is that all of our proposals have to be anchored in what young people need. Because if they're not anchored in what young people need, then there's no use of having workers in the school community. As it is right now, we have a number of special education vacancies, which means that our young people are not getting the service that they need, the instruction that they need. Our proposals reflect very specifically making sure that our young people get the assistance and the support that they need. And I think we both agree on those things, and I do see them as my allies. As a unionist, I fight the boss. I don't fight other workers.
Makes sense. Let's look kind of big picture here. We have a new president-elect, Donald Trump, and he has made some big commitments, sweeping commitments about education, talking about eliminating the Department of Education entirely. What would be the impact of that on Chicago public schools and the teachers that you lead?
Well, it would be a suplex to the Chicago public schools, to be perfectly honest with you. The Department of Education is not just a building, it is a place where Title IX is enforced, which means that we get more Angel Reese's in our space. It also means that young people are protected against sexual assaults. There's a reporting, there's a responsibility that the Department of Education makes, schools have, which is important. What's also important, especially here in the city of Chicago, is that under the Arne Duncan administration, the Chicago public schools, they were suspending black kindergartners. They were expelling and suspending black children at a higher clip than any other school district in the country. The Department of Education came in, called time out, and forced the district to create different supports for those students to minimize those suspensions and expulsions. Special education students. The federal law surrounding how you protect and provide an education to those students are essential. And so without the Department of Education, some of our most vulnerable students are in the crosshairs of whatever politician is in charge. And right now, 47, we've already gotten a glimpse of that when he was 45. We're going to need every protection, which is again why this contract settlement is important before Christmas, because we want it to serve as a force field against the machinations of the federal government and its leader.
What are some of those protections you think that we need right now?
Well, right now we need to secure special education staffing so we can actually provide the types of minutes and supports that the students need. That's one. I think number two, what we need to secure is sanctuary within our school communities. We were warned that they are going to go into schools and take children out of those schools. ICE, immigrant students. What does that mean for a teacher in a classroom teaching immigrant students? Right? What does that mean for their families? How do we secure those protections? And here's the other thing that I hear a lot from my teachers is that the teaching of Black history, of women's history, the teaching of ethnic studies will be in the crosshairs. Look no further than Florida, where the AP history, Black history course was changed because the governor said it needed to change. We can't truncate this country's complicated, rich, and beautiful history because the politics warrant it. We have to protect them. Lastly, I think what's important as well is our LGBTQIA and trans students. They are left without a civil rights protections, without a Department of Education that speaks to their humanity. We want to secure their protections in our contract as well. So there are a host of things that are on the table that will help build a force field around the students that are the most vulnerable and, quite frankly, our colleagues that are the most vulnerable.
Now, it's clear to see what the potential impact is of a sweeping change like eliminating that whole department, right? But one thing people have a tough time seeing a connection to when it comes to CTU is things like an Israel arms embargo. Recently that made news about a resolution that was voted on or is going to be voted on about an Israel arms embargo. And people just wonder, what does it have to do with teachers, a teachers union, education itself? Why does the CTU choose to kind of wade into issues like that?
Well, we have students, students who are impacted by this because of family members. We have students who are curious about this and who come to us with questions. And so what we did at our union is that we created a platform of support and understanding for the instructors who will be in our school communities. We offer, a vast library of resources for them. And we also clarify our position. Listen, you have children everywhere in this world, and we believe that we are supposed to protect, love, nurture, and educate children all over this world. And so our position is always humanity. And that's what you see reflected in our resolutions. Children dying on the south side of Chicago or children dying in Palestine is a problem.
CCU President Stacy Davis-Gates, lots more to talk about, but we're running out of time here, so appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for more information on the Chicago Teachers Union or to contact Stacy, check out the website right there on your screen.